Alright guys, it's Chad again from Moorhead Speedworks. This is going to be our end of the year video, and we're going to do a little Q&A. Some of you might have seen that I posted online a form where you could enter questions that you might have for us. Got a few responses, which is kind of what I expected. I'm going to go ahead and try to answer those and close out 2022, and actually by the time this gets posted it's probably 2023. Honestly, I'm doing this over New Year's weekend. The first question comes, why do BMWs always leak? From Joe Bob, who is currently under a garbage silver 328i. So yeah, BMWs are kind of notorious for leaking, especially power steering fluid and oil and transmission fluid, and probably diff fluid as well. Some of that I probably chalk up to the cars we're working on and the cars we're racing are 20 plus years old, and then a lot of it I think is just BMW's quality of rubber is not all that great. Yeah, after about 7 or so years, look to replace pretty much all the rubber and plastic bits under the hood. So our next question comes from Joe Bob, still under a leaky 328i, and I have a good feeling I know who Joe Bob is, but he's asking why is Mazda clearly the best at racing. I wouldn't say Mazda's the best at racing, but what they are the best at least here in the States, is promoting amateur racing, whether that be Spec Miata, Spec MX5, Global MX5, all the various series that use Mazdas, and then there's a few weird ones that run with SCCA that using RX-7s as their powertrain. But yeah, Mazda just does a really good job at, you know, giving money back to competitors, promoting the events. Kudos to them. I wish BMW would do that. BMW is probably one of the worst, in fact, helping out grassroots motorsports and amateur racing. They really don't do much, and their cars are hugely popular, and I really wish they would do more. I mean, Ford does a little bit, Honda does a little bit with the Honda Challenge cars, Mazda for sure. There's a few other manufacturers out there that do some stuff. Maybe it's a luxury European sports car thing where they're too good to spend some money down in the grassroots. So, but Mazda is clearly not the best at racing now. So the next one is, can we get a build breakdown on 147? Spare any suspension setups, obviously, but seeing the car in detail with all the work you've done would be cool. Powertrain, suspension, aero, fuel system and interior, brakes, driver comfort, etc. And that comes from Dunder Mifflin, who I assume is in Pennsylvania somewhere. Yeah, so on 147, it started life as a 330 Ci, and that's pretty much how we've gotten it to be as fast as it is. All right, just kidding. We'll probably likely do a actual video on 147 with a kind of a breakdown of the build and what's all in it. JT in California, and he asked Mark 20 versus Mark 60 ABS systems. Also, how to install a brake pressure sensor on the Mark 20 for an AIM device. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the E46 series of BMW 3 Series came with either a Mark 20 ABS, which was the earlier cars, or a Mark 60, which was the later cars. But the easiest way to tell is if your ABS module is underneath the brake master beside the booster on the driver's side of the car, the left side of the car, then that's a Mark 60 unit. That's the later style. If your ABS module is on the right side of the car, on the passenger side of the car, then that's a Mark 20. The major difference that I've seen is the Mark 20 has a separate accumulator system that is underneath the master cylinder, and because of its location, because of the location of the actual ABS unit over on the right side, you have a lot more lines going to and from it. Performance wise, we've actually ran both cars with pro drivers in them, and we didn't see a obvious performance advantage between the two. Now, probably the real advantage with the Mark 60 is it's much simpler. It's all contained within one unit. You have far fewer lines going to and from, so it's a little easier to bleed out. And then finally, parts for it are still available. We're having a really hard time finding any Mark 20 parts. If you've already got a Mark 20 car, I don't think it's worth going through the trouble of trying to upgrade it to a Mark 60 car. But if you're just now getting started and you're looking for a donor for a Spec E46 or another build, I would tend to say look for a Mark 60 car, just because it's a little bit simpler system to work on. It's easier to bleed out. And for now, the parts are a lot easier to come by. For your second question about putting a brake pressure sensor on a Mk60 ABS unit, it's done exactly the same way as the Mk60. You tap a line with a T fitting. The major difference is with the Mk60, we're able to provide you with a plug-and-play line that we've already cut and flared, installed the T fitting, installed the pressure sensor, all that good stuff, and you basically just bolt that in between your ABS module and your master cylinder. And then of course you got to bleed the system and hook up the wiring. But on the Mk20, because the lines are so long and they run behind the back side of the engine, we can't take that line out, cut it, flare it, reinstall the pieces, and send it back to you like that. So there's a very inexpensive 37-degree flaring tool that you can get from Summit Racing, and it's not the greatest tool, but it'll do for what you need. And you can basically just pick a good place, a good location in the engine bay, cut the line, flare it, install the fittings right there on the car rather than trying to do it off the car. It's not the most ideal situation, but really, honestly, that's the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you're gonna have to wait till you have the engine out to really get all those lines out. And as far as which line you want to install it on, we always install it between the master cylinder and the ABS module, because typically when you're putting a brake pressure sensor onto the car, you're doing it for driver development reasons. You want to see how hard the driver is braking, what their release is like, that sort of thing. So you don't want to see it post ABS, because the ABS module is going to be doing some things to that pressure. All right, next we have, I wasn't aware you flew Apaches during your time in the service. Mind giving a background of you, your partners, and how you started it all? From Hunter in Cincinnati, Ohio. I try not to, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging or anything like that, but we're obviously a proud veteran-owned business. I served for over 10 years in the U.S. Army. My father, who helps here at the shop, he served for over 37 years, I believe, in the Army. We were both helicopter pilots. He flew Blackhawks and Hueys. I flew Apaches. H-64 Delta Longbow Apaches. Now they're onto like the Echo model, but I flew those from probably 2005 till 2013, 14 or sometime like that. But yeah, I was always into aviation. I had a private pilot's license, soloed when I was 16 and was really into flying, and was lucky enough to get a slot to flight school in the Army, and I did that for a number of years. And I was not just a pilot, but I was a pilot in command, air mission commander, and a maintenance test pilot. So I did a little bit of everything with the helicopters. I really enjoyed the actual flying and the missions and that sort of stuff, and it kind of gave me a technical background that a lot of it's applicable to racing, surprisingly enough. That's that. We'll eventually probably do a more in-depth behind the scenes, behind Moorhead Speedworks video, our whole history. But yeah, we got a couple Army aviators here at the shop. Next question is from Marshall in Canada, and he asks, some legal Spec E46 competitive mods. So that's kind of tricky because it's a spec class. So a lot of the mods, I guess you can call them mods, are spelled out in the rule book. Like, everybody's running MCS one-way non-remotes. Everybody's running the same Hyperco spring rates. So you really need to build the car to the maximum allowance of the rules. And what I mean by that is, so look in the rules where there's things that are open or not regulated. For instance, the differential. Now, that's a huge expense, but if you're looking for maximum performance and it's open other than the ratio, get a race carrier from Diffs Online. I mean, it's lighter, less rotating mass there, less friction, it's rim polished, all that good stuff. Yeah, it's going to be pretty pricey. But if you're looking to maximize your performance within the rule book, that's one thing you can do. Now, I will say that's probably beyond the point of diminishing returns for most drivers. So if you're 2 seconds off the pace and you're like, I need that $6,000 differential, it's not going to put you in the front. But if you're competing for a national title, you're in the runoffs, you're in NASA championships or something like that, and you're looking for that last 10th, then spending the money on things like that is going to make a difference. Other places, obviously, you're allowed 225 horsepower by the rules. Is your engine making 225 horsepower? Does the power curve have enough power under the curve? I mean, is it just peaking at 225? Now, a lot of this is limited because you're on a spec tune, so you can't tune the car per se, but does it have vacuum leaks? Are the fuel pressures where they're supposed to be? So do all those things to make sure that your engine is actually healthy and producing 225 horsepower, but not just 225 horsepower peak, but that it looks good. Yeah, the big thing is just maximizing to the rules. And then setup. Setup is huge. It's a spec class, so it's more of a racer's class. So the better handling your car, the more forgiving handling your car is, generally the faster you're going to be. So you can set up a car so it's fast, but if it's on edge the whole dang time, especially in an enduro class, it's going to be difficult. Now, I assume since you're talking Spec E46, we're probably talking more sprint race type stuff. A lot of the same qualities you look for in a race car are going to be the same regardless if it's enduro racing or sprint racing. For instance, you got to cross the finish line in order to win, so having a really powerful car with a good setup and all the most expensive parts doesn't mean anything if you don't have the reliability. So take care of those reliability things. Make sure your car's making all the power that it can make legally. From there, the little tricks and stuff are going to be things like reducing drag. And I mean both aero drag and drag from like hung up brake calipers, or bad CV joints or bad wheel bearings. So put the car up on jack stands, free spin the wheel. If it comes to an immediate stop, your brakes are probably dragging. Aero is another one. Clean up as much as you can. And a big part of aero is also cooling. So if your engine's cooling system is not operating at its optimal, and you have to have the front end completely open just to keep it within, safety margins, then you're leaving performance on the table. So we like to maximize our cooling system. So oil cooler, quality radiator, thermostat housing, all those things, so that the engine runs nice and cool, so that you can go back and tape up the front end and reduce your drag and increase your downforce on the front end of the car. It's not an aero class at all, but you don't want to be pulling a parachute around the track either. So I could probably do a little bit more in-depth video, but there's so much little things you can do to kind of incrementally improve your performance. But I would say make sure you're making as much power as possible. Make sure the car's as reliable as possible. Make sure the setup is as good as possible. But I'll say again, the biggest thing is going to be the driver. I mean, we've won championships with not enough power out of the car. So it's still the driver. Next question comes from Rick in Florida. It's kind of a long one. I'll probably put it up on the screen here. But he says he's a stepdad to a boy who always wanted to be a professional driver, and he's gone through various different series and won various championships, etc. Guy says he's 75 and he's afraid he won't be there to help him cross the finish line that he's been focused on since he was 3 years old. How can I guide him into finding sponsors and support his journey after I'm gone? He's got the determination, dedication, drive, and focus. All he needs is the money, and he'll do the rest. Any suggestions? That's a tough one. Yeah. I'm by no means a professional driver. I get to hang out with some of them, but unfortunately in the States, there's no real ladder series when it comes to road racing. From what I've seen, it's not like Europe where you can get into a lower level formula series and kind of work your way up as your skills improve and as you gain sponsors and things like that. So they really don't have that over here. They have it more so for circle track stuff, for stock cars and that sort of thing. But if he's looking at road racing, it's going to be a tough journey. You either have the backing already, so you either have family money. Just skills alone is really tough. And what I would probably tell him is the best way to get a foot in the door is to become a coach. I'm not talking about an instructor with your local DE, but a coach, an actual coach that works with a gentleman driver to build their skills. And that's where probably the majority of the pro drivers here in the States, that's probably their biggest source of income, honestly. They get linked up with some clients and become their coach, and then they in turn become their co-driver for whatever series it is. And it's going to be that way all the way up until the very top levels of pro racing pro road racing in the States. And we're talking sports cars here, not Formula, but sports cars or GT cars. Up until you get to like the highest levels in IMSA, there's always a gentleman driver who's kind of funding the operation. And that gentleman driver is going to need a pro coach because these are enduro series where they have to perform a driver change. So get a foot in the door at one of these lower level series if you can, like the Michelin Pilot Challenge series, which is like the lower level in IMSA. Put your talents on display, and hopefully you can move up. But getting actual sponsorship, I mean, the big teams really struggle to get actual sponsors that are going to pay for a driver to be there. That's really difficult. Most of these series where you have a gentleman driver, the sponsors and whatnot you see on the side of the car or on the race suits, those are generally the companies that guy owns. So he's probably getting some sort of advertising or marketing write-off for that. So it's not really like, you're going to come in the lower levels of IMSA or SRO and be sponsored by Coca-Cola or McDonald's or whatever. It's probably going to be whoever your co-driver or some, internet startup or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's a good question, and eventually I'd like to get some interviews with some of the drivers I know and actually kind of ask them those questions, like how do you get started to where you can actually earn a living being a driver, because you're not the first person to ask me that. I've had other younger drivers kind of coming up, and it's tough. I'll just say that it's tough, unless you got the family backing to send your kid to Europe and have them work their way up the formula ladder. It's really tough. So, but good luck either way. All right, next question comes from Brian in Colorado, who asked about our 360 camera that we have on the 147, our WRL race car. You've probably seen some of the videos with that, and that's kind of a new thing that we've added here in the last, 3-4 months. We've added this. But yeah, it's a really cool device. It's actually made by Insta360. That's all one word, INSTA 360. I'll try to link it as well. But yeah, 360 cameras have been out for a while now. I remember seeing some Spec E46 racers using them years ago, and I was like, that's really cool. But I just now kind of got into them. They're really kind of simple to use, other than the fact that they use accelerometers in them to kind of orient themselves and figure out where the horizon is and what to focus on and all that. The problem is when you stick it in a race car, you're pulling lateral G's, you're pulling longitudinal G's, you got, yaw and all these forces going on, and it kind of throws it wacky. So it doesn't, if you were just to leave it to its own devices, download the video and try to watch it, it's the video framing is constantly moving because it's pulling G's, so it's getting confused which way's up, essentially. They have some cheaper ones, but the one I got was the Insta360 X3, which they just came out with in 2022. It does a little over 4K. I can't remember, it's like 5 point something. I think it does it up to 60 frames per second, if I recall. You just have to check their website. But it's pretty good quality. I would recommend it over a GoPro because you don't have to really worry about framing. I mean, you could literally stick it on someone's helmet and just press record, let them do whatever they need to do, and then come back and in post on your computer, you can frame it however you want it. And they have an app too for Android and iOS, so you could do it mobily if you wanted to as well. I find it a little easier to do it on the computer. But yeah, really cool device. And then I think he had a question in there about it. Oh yeah, so will it record for 8 hours or more? Do you use it just for YouTube, or have you been able to use it for submitting for WRL reviews? So it'll record for 8 hours as long as it has power supply and enough memory. So I bought a 1 terabyte micro SD, this little tiny thing. It's incredible that they got 1 terabyte of storage on it, and it wasn't cheap. It's just a USB-C port on the side of it, and so you can just take a USB-C port, plug it in there, run that to a USB charger to a 12 volt source that you have in your car, which you can get from Amazon or wherever, and then the thing will record for 8 hours continuously. And we did that at Coda both days. So I have a humongous set of files from Coda, and we just kind of pick and choose the cool stuff we want to look at. But yeah, if you have a big enough card in there and continuous power from your vehicle, it'll record the whole thing. And for your last question regarding whether or not We've been able to use it for submitting for WRL reviews. Kinda. There was a bad incident at Sebring, and two cars went into the wall, and one of them kind of just burst into flames. Driver's okay, fortunately, but our 360 camera picked it up because we were driving past it, and it picked it up where it started and kind of was able to follow the incident as our car drove by it. And I submitted that to WRL just in case they needed to see something from it. Yeah, you could certainly use it for, you know, if you have contact with another car on track or something like that. I mean, it's probably better than the majority of the cameras on cars out there. It's definitely better than your average GoPro or your older Smarty Cam, that kind of thing. The only disadvantage with it is, as I mentioned, the G-forces kind of play havoc with it, so you have to do a little post editing to fix that. And then the other issue is there's really no auto start stop record function based on GPS like you have with the Smarty Cam. So you have to have someone going in there, press record. Yeah, you could have it connected to the app via Bluetooth, but that's, you know, Bluetooth range. It's not going to work like, hey, the car's already out on track and you can't start it. All right, and this is the final question. For someone who is looking into getting into enduros, what is the average cost for a weekend for, say, a WRL GP2 class car? That's hard for me to answer because we really haven't ran a GP2 car. Yeah, we've ran a Spec E46 in GP2, but it was kind of just to get track time type thing. We weren't really like pushing for wins or anything with it. So I can't give you like a hard number, but you can kind of do the math yourself. Just do up a spreadsheet real quick, like a Google sheet or something like that, and then just, you know, put in. You'll need at least, I would say, bare minimum 3 sets of wheels and tires. That's bare minimum. Some tracks you're absolutely gonna have to change tires. You know, during the race, and in that case, you're gonna have to have 4 sets, and then maybe a 5th set of scrubs for Friday qualifying. So tires is a big thing there. We always go with 2 sets of wheels and tires for each day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that's 6 sets of wheels and tires you need to have. And then, like I said, on Friday you can kind of run scrubs. They don't need to be stickers unless you're planning on doing the full day and just pushing a 10/10 the whole day, which we never do. So that's your tires, and then you're gonna have to kind of calculate your fuel burn. That's gonna, you know, GP2 is gonna be better than GP1 and definitely better than GTO as far as fuel consumption goes, and even tire abuse and tire wear. But you'd have to calculate that up as well. And most GP2 cars are probably gonna be running off 93 octane pump gas. Our GP1 car is as well, so that's gonna save you a little bit of money, especially if you drive out of the track to get your fuel. Then entry fees, that's a fixed price, a known price based on the track, so that's, you know, $2,000, $2,400, whatever it is. We always change brake pads before each race, so that's at least 2 sets of brake pads you're going to use that weekend. For Friday qualifying, we generally run the brake pads we ran at our last race, or the last Sunday race. There's no reason to slap on new rotors and pads on Friday morning. Sometimes we'll put on a set towards the end of the day just so we can bed them in, and even then that's really not necessary unless your pads have some very specific bedding procedures. Typically ours don't. So we'll usually put on brand new pads and front rotors Friday night, and brand new pads on the rear Friday night, and we'll run those through Saturday, and then Saturday night we'll go back and put brand new pads on the front of the car. Usually the rotors will give us 2 days, no problem, and usually the rear rotors is no problem, and the rear pads are no problem if we started with new ones on Friday night. So factor in, this is again coming from a GP1 E46 car, 2 sets of front pads and 1 set of rear pads and 1 set of front rotors per weekend. I think that's probably going to be your typical brake wear, even on a GP2 car. We tried to push it before and use some pads that had a little bit of use on them, and we went all the way, this was at Road America actually, went all the way down to the backing plate, so we've never done that again. The next biggest expense is going to be your spares package, and regardless of your spares package size, it's never enough. There's always going to be that one part that you're short on, or you didn't think about, or you use 2 of them when you only thought you would run through 1, whatever it is. spares package is going to be a really big expense. And for our one car that we run in WRL, we have basically 2 trailers we take with us for the spares and all our pit equipment, setup equipment, 4-wheeler, bicycles, tire racks, all that. So you can get it down, obviously, but I would say, a 1-car team probably needs at least a 38, 40 foot trailer at a minimum to get all your stuff there. And that's probably pushing it. It's probably a little easier in GP2. And some of that depends on like how big is your pit setup and do you have a golf cart or a 4-wheeler or whatever. But I would plan on having spares for like all your running gear. So hubs, axles, bearings, all the associated small hardware with that, spare transmission, spare differential. Having a spare engine is great as well if you got the room and the money. Anything you could think of, you probably need it as a spare. You probably need 2 of them. On the flip side, the good thing is that the WRL paddock is very, very generous. We've borrowed stuff from other teams or bought it from them. They've borrowed from us. That happens all the time. Sorry I can't give you a more exact number as far as running costs in GP2. I would probably reach out to some of those teams, maybe on the Facebook group for WRL, and kind of get a better idea. But I didn't even get into things like logistics, towing there, your tow rigs, fuel, hotel cost, food cost, drinking water. But there's so many little things you probably don't even think about until you run one weekend. But try to do it on the cheap as possible. Try to do it as cheaply as possible to begin with, and kind of see how you like it, and then expand from there. But yeah, if you have a larger team of drivers, you can obviously defray the cost a lot by spreading it out. But racing is not cheap, regardless. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the question and answer session. We got a pretty decent amount of questions there, I think, for just having put this up. Hopefully in the future we get more. I'll continue to leave the form in the description of probably all our videos, so you can just click on that link and then submit a question. I'll leave it live. And that way we can just do this once a month or so. Yeah, if you're going to submit a question, try to make it as specific as possible so I can give you like a more accurate answer. But yeah, that was good. I appreciate everybody who contributed to that. And since this is going to be the last video of 2022, probably first video of 2023, I just want to give a big thanks to the whole team here at MSW. I've got a great set of guys here that help out. We're a really small team. A lot of people think we're a big shop. We're not. I'm 4,500 square feet or so, and there's really 4 full-time guys that work here, including myself. So I want to give a big thanks to Ashton and Josh, my two guys that work in the shop, and help us shift products, develop new products, work on cars. They crew at the races. They do everything. Big thanks to my dad, who is retired, but comes in here every day and helps out. So he's been a great asset to the company. I want to thank my mother, she arranges all the hotels and everything for us for when we travel the races. That's a huge help. We're developing some pretty neat products that I think will be a big help to the community, things that I've seen that are kind of needed or improved upon. And so be on the lookout for those. Make sure you're following our Instagram and our Facebook and our YouTube. A lot of that will be announced there. And I just, again, want to thank everybody, and I hope you had a great year, and I hope you have even better 2023. So thanks.